Eric Clapton finally confesses the truth about George Harrison when he turns 80. Eric Patrick Clapton was born on March 30th, 1945, in Ripley, Surrey, England. Clapton was up in a strange familial situation that made him think his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. This finding had a big impact on him, and it would later change how he expressed his feelings through music. He liked the guitar from a young age and listened to blues records by performers like Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and B.B. King. These early influences would shape not just his musical sound, but also his personality as an artist who combined British rock with American blues. In the early 1960s, Clapton became well known as a member of the Yardbirds, a band that was at the center of the British blues explosion. The Yardbirds were successful in business, but Clapton left the group in 1965 because he thought they were drifting too far from their blues beginnings in search of a sound that was more poor-oriented. His commitment to being real, even if it meant losing money, became a defining aspect of his career. Clapton left the Yardbirds and joined John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. There, he got the nickname Slowhand and became known as a blues guitarist with amazing technique, passion, and technical precision. Clapton helped start the famous power trio Cream in 1966 with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. With Cream, Clapton took rock music to new heights by mixing improvisation, heavy blues, and psychedelic sounds into a new style. His powerful guitar solos and developing confidence as a player and performer were on display in songs like Sunshine of Your Love and White Room. Cream only lasted 2 years because of problems between members and creative differences, yet their short time together made Clapton a global rock icon and a pioneer of the Guitar Hero era. After Cream broke up, Clapton got together with Steve Winwood, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gretsch to form another supergroup called Blind Faith. Blind Faith only put out one album, but it had songs that are still popular today, such as Can't Find My Way Home. The short live effort showed that Clapton's musical passion was always looking for new sounds and deeper ways to express himself. He also worked with musicians like Delaney and Bonnie and later Derek and the Dominoes. Their 1970 album, Layla and Other Love Ballads, became one of rock's finest works of art. The title tune, which was inspired by Clapton's unrequited love for Pattie Boyd, the wife of his friend George Harrison, is still one of the most famous love ballads ever recorded. Its guitar riffs and sheer emotional strength make it stand out. Clapton had a very successful career, but he also had a lot of problems with addiction. In the 1970s, he struggled with heroin addiction and then with alcoholism, fights that almost ruined him at work and in his personal life. But Clapton was able to beat these demons with hard work and the help of friends. His recovery became a source of courage and inspiration for others who were going through the same thing. His honesty about these problems made him seem more vulnerable to the public, reminding supporters that behind the guitar, God was a person fighting their own problems. Clapton's career in the 1980s and thereafter was defined by both artistic reinvention and personal catastrophe. In 1991, his 4-year-old son Connor died in a horrible accident, which was a huge loss for him. Tears in Heaven, one of his most moving and well-loved songs, emerged out of that sadness. Its soft melody and sad lyrics impacted millions. This song not only honored his kid, but it also resonated with many people who had lost someone, solidifying Clapton's position as not only a great guitarist, but also a deeply personal communicator through music. Clapton has worked with a huge number of famous musicians throughout the years, including as George Harrison, Bob Dylan, J.J. Cale, and B.B. King. He could easily switch between blues, rock, pop, and even reggae, as shown by his classic interpretation of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff. This wide span of musical inquiry kept his work fresh and important for many generations. His deep knowledge of the blues gave everything he played an authenticity that few could equal. Eric Clapton's personal life has always been just as important to him as his music and the people he loves. In the late 1960s, he became close to George Harrison of the Beatles, and their connection turned into one of the most famous love stories of his life. Their friendship wasn't merely a passing one. It came from both of them respecting and admiring each other's art. Harrison drew Clapton into his universe, where he played guitar on Beatles songs like While My Guitar Gently Weeps. The two of them regularly spent long hours discussing ideas, trying out new sounds, and working together in ways that challenged both of their creative limits. But Clapton was going through a deep personal struggle, even if he and his friends were close and worked together on art. He had fallen in love with Pattie Boyd, Harrison's wife, who was an English model and muse. She had already inspired Harrison's classic love song, Something. Clapton's sentiments for Boyd made him feel both passionate and sad. He wrote some of his most famous songs because he loved her, but she didn't love him back. One of these songs, Layla, was about his pain and desire. Years later, Harrison and Boyd's marriage fell apart, and they got a divorce in 1977. Boyd and Clapton ultimately made their lengthy and tumultuous relationship official after Boyd's marriage to Harrison ended. On March 27, 1979, in Tucson, Arizona, the pair got married. This was seen by many as the end of a love triangle that had been going on for a year and had intrigued fans in the media. For Clapton, who had fought through addiction and the anguish of missing Boyd. The marriage represented a personal accomplishment and a fresh start. But being married wasn't always easy. Clapton and Boyd wanted to establish a family, but they had to deal with devastating problems. They wanted kids, but they kept having miscarriages and even went to doctors for aid. They tried in vitro fertilization in 1984, which was still a new and extremely taxing method at the time. Sadly, these attempts too failed, leaving Clapton and Boyd heartbroken and putting a pressure on their marriage because they couldn't have children. Clapton made choices at this difficult time that would have big effects. He had an affair with Lori Delanto, an Italian model and actress. A son was born from this relationship. On August 21st, 1986, Connor Clapton was born. He brought joy to Clapton's otherwise troubled personal life. But Connor's arrival also dealt a huge shock to his marriage. Boyd was heartbroken when she found out that Clapton had cheated on her and had a child with Delanto. The treachery was too much for the couple to handle, and their marriage fell apart. Boyd and Clapton divorced in 1989, ending a marriage that had been hailed as the end of one of rock music's most renowned love tales. The loss of Clapton's young son, Connor, was devastating and came too soon. It made his life even more tragic. Connor fell from an open window in his bedroom on the 53rd story of a Manhattan apartment building on March 20th, 1991. He was just 4 years old, a terrible accident that left Clapton heartbroken beyond words. The loss changed his life in a big way, and it changed the way he thought about music and life in general. Clapton turned his emotions into one of the most moving songs of his career, Tears in Heaven, a poignant ballad that showed how sad a father was and how hopeful he was that they would be together again in the afterlife. The song would go on to touch millions of people and become one of his most famous compositions and a worldwide hymn of loss and healing. After a lot of sadness, Clapton found love again years later. In 1998, when he was 53 years old, he met Melia McInerney, a 22-year-old administrative assistant, at a party in Columbus, Ohio, after one of his shows. At first, their relationship was discreet and low-key. They dated in secret for a year before going public with it in 1999. This relationship gave Clapton stability and tranquility, unlike his previous high-profile romances, which were often full of drama and attention. They got married on January 1st, 2002 in a small ceremony at St. Mary Magdalene Church in Ripley, the same place where Clapton was born. This tied his new life to his roots. Together, they built the family Clapton had always wanted. They raised 3 girls who provided him joy and stability after years of trouble, grief, and change. Eric Clapton is 80 years old and has experienced a life that most musicians could only dream of. He has had amazing successes, agonizing difficulties, and legendary friendships. His relationship with George Harrison of the Beatles is one of the most interesting and lasting parts of his story. Fans and biographers have been wondering for years what kind of friendship and rivalry they had, as well as the intricate love triangle that included Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. Clapton has finally spoken freely about the intensity of that relationship in his later years, disclosing secrets that he kept hidden for most of his career. Clapton called Harrison a kindred spirit and a bandmate when their musical universes crossed paths. Clapton said that George was more than just a friend. He was like a brother to me, yet we always had this unspoken competition going on. Both men were amazing guitarists, but their techniques were completely different. Clapton was fiery, passionate, and bluesy, while Harrison was lyrical, nuanced, and spiritually oriented. Even though they were different in many ways, they clearly respected each other. Clapton remembered late-night jam sessions at Harrison's house when they would trade licks, laugh at their mistakes, and tell each other to keep going. But there were times when their bond was tense. The most famous strain happened when Clapton fell in love with Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. In rock circles, it was an open secret, and Clapton never entirely denied it. I couldn't help how I felt, Clapton recalled. I loved her with everything I had, and I think George knew it long before anyone else did. What should have ended a less strong friendship instead into one of the oddest and longest-lasting friendships in music history. Clapton put his obsession and longing into his music. He wrote songs like Layla that became famous for their pain and desire. Harrison, on the other hand, never completely turned away from Clapton, even if he was hurt. Clapton said that he had felt guilty about what happened for a long time. He admitted that he knew George was hurt. But the amazing thing about him was that he forgave me. He was the most forgiving person I've ever met. Harrison's kind heart was a big part of their relationship, that's for sure. Boyd and Harrison kept playing together even after Boyd left Harrison and married Clapton. They still looked like they were on stage together, as if nothing had happened. It appeared virtually impossible to outsiders, but for them, music was always the way to heal the scars that life caused. Clapton said that their friendship's quiet strength became even clearer as the years went by, especially while Harrison was sick. Clapton said quietly, "I visited George as often as I could when he was sick. We didn't even have to talk much. Sometimes we just sit together, and the silence said more than words ever could." Harrison's death in 2001 was a crushing blow for Clapton, who organized the concert for George the following year as a tribute to his friend's life and legacy. That concert, filled with music, laughter, and reverence, became one of Clapton's proudest achievements. Looking back now, Clapton admits that his relationship with Harrison shaped him more than almost any other. "I've played with so many great musicians in my life," Clapton said. "But George was special. He wasn't trying to outplay you or prove anything. He was just trying to make something beautiful. That taught me a lot about what music is really for." At 80, Clapton speaks about Harrison with a tenderness that reveals how much the friendship still means to him. Gone are the layers of bravado, rivalry, and the complications of love. In their place is a simple truth that Clapton carries with him: that despite everything, the jealousy, the heartbreak, the fame, and the passing years, George Harrison was and always will be one of the greatest friends he ever had. George had this light about him. Clapton said, even when things were dark, he carried peace with him. "Every day I miss him, and the truth is, I'll never stop missing him." For much of his early life and career, Eric Clapton's brilliance on the guitar was shadowed by the demons of addiction. In the 1970s, he struggled heavily with drugs and alcohol, falling into a lifestyle that nearly consumed his extraordinary gift. Yet in 1982, at a turning point that would reshape not only his career, but also his personal life, Clapton made the courageous decision to walk away from alcohol and other recreational drugs. This was not a simple or overnight change, but the beginning of a long, painful, and ultimately victorious battle to reclaim his health, his music, and his peace of mind. His decision to embrace sobriety became one of the defining acts of his life, one that gave him the clarity to continue creating music that touched millions. Even after overcoming alcohol and drugs, however, Clapton faced another challenge: nicotine. Known for being a heavy cigarette smoker for decades, the habit lingered long after other vices had been conquered. It wasn't until 1994, more than a decade after he had already freed himself from substance addiction, that Clapton finally stubbed out his last cigarette and left behind one of the final chains to his past. This journey of self-discipline and resilience reveals not only the vulnerability of a man often idolized as a rock icon, but also the determination of someone unwilling to let his talent or his life be destroyed. Clapton's story of quitting drinking, drugs, and eventually cigarettes is more than a tale of recovery. It is a testament to human endurance, the power of choice, and the way survival can pave the road to creative rebirth.